everyone, my name is Jessie Jennings and welcome to Let's Paint Live, our paint party where we teach you to paint a full painting in just about an hour. So tonight we'll be painting this pretty floral bouquet in this glass vase. So it looks a little bit more advanced than the ones we normally do in an hour, but I promise it's super easy and I'm going to show you some techniques so we can get it done nice and quickly. So the supplies we'll need for this painting are an 11 by 14 inch canvas. So if you have a different canvas, that's totally fine. If you have a smaller or larger canvas, that'll work great. Even if it's a square, you can kind of adapt the dimensions and the proportions of your flowers and vase to fit your canvas. So any size canvas is really fine. I've got my brushes here. I've got some palette paper, my water basin, my paper towels, and I also have a hair dryer because we're going to dry a little bit in between some layers to make sure that we can keep things moving. And then of course, as always, we're using our Folk Art acrylic matte paints. So just like we normally do, we'll be using our Let's Paint Live kit, which is a really great 24-piece kit. It comes with 24 beautiful colors, and it also includes your pack of brushes. So a really great value, and you can use it to paint all of our Let's Paint Live classes, which there's dozens on plaidonline.com/letspaint. So specifically the colors I'll be using in this painting are navy blue, baby pink, Dutch aqua, cardinal red, apple red, classic green, daffodil yellow, wicker white, and aqua. So you can definitely substitute some of these colors. If you have any questions about color substitutions or mixing the colors, if you don't have the exact one, please let us know in the comments and I'd be happy to help you figure that out and make your painting look beautiful. So we have Dylan Estes here in the studio, so if you have any questions or comments, make sure to pop those in the chat and he can answer them for you or read them aloud to me, and I think we'll get started.
Perfect, sounds good. I think we're live on both platforms, so we're excited to have you guys along with us.
Awesome, all right. So to start this painting, we are going to base coat our entire canvas in navy blue. So you may be wondering why, because obviously we don't have a navy blue background, but that's going to be the base of our painting, and that's what's going to give us this really cool outline that makes all of our shapes and colors pop off the canvas. So I'm going to grab some of my navy blue paint. You can use black for this too, or any dark color really. We just want that dark color to make all of these lighter colors and brighter colors really pop. So I'm going to put a good bit on my palette paper because we're going to be base coating the whole thing. And out of my variety, I just have a variety of flat brushes here tonight. That's what I'll be using. I'm going to grab my largest one. So this is a 3/4 inch flat brush. And I'm going to start base coating my canvas. I'm going to start at the top left. That's mostly because I'm right-handed, so I can kind of just come down to the right. Makes it a little bit easier. And whenever you're base coating a canvas or anything for that matter, you usually need less paint than you think. A lot of people have a tendency to sort of glob it on so they can get it over with more quickly, which I completely understand the mindset behind that, but it really doesn't take very much paint to coat your canvas. You just want one thin, smooth, and even coat. And if you're using our Folk Art matte acrylic paints, one coat and done for this canvas. It'll be really great coverage. You will see hardly any of the white showing through. So just keep it really nice and even and smooth. And that will also help our paint to dry more quickly. So let us know, guys, if you're painting along tonight, if you are a seasoned painter and you've painted with us many times, or if this is your first time joining one of our Let's Paint Live classes, we would love to hear from you. Let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you guys in the comments.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of people. We've got from Alabama and Arkansas,
Awesome.
Toronto, Missouri.
Well, welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're following along tonight. This is going to be a fun one. And like I said, this really will be really great coverage. We definitely won't need a second coat, but even if you have a little bit of that white showing through, don't stress about it because as you can see in our final painting, we're going to cover the majority of this up. 99% of this blue will be covered. We'll just have those pretty outlines. So there's a little bit of white showing. Don't spend too much time on this background because it really isn't necessary. You can do the sides now too if you want, unless you're going to frame it like I did with the final. Totally up to you. And I'm going to have just enough to cover it. Okay, so smooth out any areas that are too much paint or any lumps on there, just so it dries nice and evenly. And then I'm going to wipe the excess paint off my brush and rinse it.
As you're doing that, we have a relatively new member of our Let's Paint community. We have a new person named Patty. This is their second live.
Oh, hey, Patty,
with
welcome.
us. Yeah.
Let us know what the other class was you attended, but we're so glad you tuned in tonight.
And for since you are new, this is the Let's Paint Live kit, just as Jesse said earlier. So if you get this kit, you can paint all the paintings in the Let's Paint Live series. Jesse helped develop the kit. She put together all the colors so that you can paint over 100 paintings now with the same paint set.
Believe it or not, we've been doing this for almost 5 years.
Yeah,
so
we had to count it. Yeah,
it's crazy.
About 5.
Okay, so I'm going to grab my hairdryer now, and I'm going to dry the background. And since I get asked this a lot, whenever I dry my acrylic paints, I put it on the highest airflow setting, and I toggle between hot and cold. Just when my painting gets a little bit toasty, I toggle back to cold just so it doesn't heat up too much. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so that looks nice and dry. Okay, so the next step, a lot of times when you're painting, you may start with the background and kind of work your way into the foreground. And what I mean by that is the area behind whatever it is you're painting, and then you work your way closer to whatever is sort of closest to you if this were a photograph. But today we're going to start by painting our flowers, and then we're going to fill in the background afterwards. And that's going to allow us to keep that really pretty navy outline that kind of halos all the shapes in our painting, like we talked about earlier, that really makes those colors pop. So we're doing a little bit of color mixing to get some of these pretty pinks and some of the variations. So I'm going to put a few colors on my palette to start. I'm going to grab some baby pink, which is just like the name, a really pretty pale pink color. I'm going to grab some of my cardinal red, which is a darker red. Some apple red, which is just a touch brighter. And then I'm also going to grab some daffodil yellow, and we're going to use this to warm up our colors and give us more of that coral tone. And then I'm also going to grab some of my wicker white, just in case you want to lighten any of the colors as we go. So I like to have those in my palette so I don't have to worry about, I don't have to stop while I'm mixing and get more paint. It's all ready there for me to mix my colors with. Okay, so I'm going to start with this larger flower up here. So this kind of, sort of, it's a little smaller than my hand. It's in the top left area of my canvas. You can do whatever composition you want on your painting, And what I mean by composition is the layout of all the shapes on your painting. So I'm going to try to stick with my original one just so I can, you know, if that's what you came here to paint, you get to do that. But feel free to move yours and change yours. That's totally fine. So I'm going to grab one of my smaller flat brushes. This is a 1/2 inch flat. And I'm going to pick up some of my apple red. Then I'm going to grab a touch of my daffodil yellow. And of course, I don't need to tell you guys, this will make us a nice orange color. Grab a little more daffodil yellow. Then I'm going to put some of my wicker white in there just to lighten it up a little. And what we're looking for is that pinky color. So I'm going to grab some of my baby pink. Mix that in there. Now we're getting this peachy light coral, this kind of salmon color, which I really like. But I think I want it to be a little bit pinker like that. So I'm going to add some of my cardinal red in here.
As you're doing that, Jesse, we have another early viewer. This is actually their first time, Darlene. And they were saying they wanted to see how this worked and if they'd be able to follow along. And Darlene, this is the series for you.
Absolutely.
Jesse has broken this down. She's going to go step by step, and you'll be able to watch this live stream again. So if you do end up wanting to get the kit for yourself, you'll absolutely be able to do this and come up with a really good result.
Yeah, welcome. Just like Dylan said, we try to keep our Let's Paint Live super duper beginner friendly. And so this class is for everyone. This is for the seasoned painter and the very beginner. We have a little bit for everyone, so it's just a fun painting if you're really used to painting and you've done this a lot. But also, like I said, we break it down really, really simply, step by step, so if you've never painted before, you can still follow along easily. Okay, so while we were talking, I ended up with the color I was looking for. I started with this warm red. I added some yellow and some baby pink to lighten it up, and it was feeling very orange. And so I added a cool red. So what I mean by that, we have this really warm red, our apple red, and then a really cool red, our cardinal red. The cool red sort of made it more pink again and less orangey. So that's why I did that. So that's the color I'm looking for, this pretty coral color. All right, so now I'm gonna wipe the excess paint off my brush because whenever I use my brush for mixing on my palette, I don't like to paint with all of that excess paint in the bristles of my brush because it just makes it a little bit more difficult to control how much paint is going onto my canvas, and you always want to be in control of that. Okay, so my brush is clean. I'm going to pick up some of this pretty coral color we mixed, and I'm going to paint this big flower like I mentioned. So I'm going to create the petals by using the flat edge of my brush. We have this nice chiseled edge. I'm going to press lightly, and then I'm going to pull down, press harder, and then pull up to get that petal shape. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to press lightly, I'm going to press down, and then I'm going to pull up. And now we're going to get that perfect petal shape that we're looking for. And I will do this all the way around, keeping in mind they don't have to be exact and they don't have to be perfect because no flower petal is. They're always a little bit different, and that's what makes it look more real. I'm going to paint these all around to get this nice big flower here.
And just to remind everyone, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, this live will be available immediately after we finish going live. It'll be published on our page. And if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in our live streams playlist or in our feed, the latest video in the feed. And on Facebook, it'll just be at the top of your timeline on the Plaid Crafts page.
Okay. So I went all the way around and I made all of those petals. So like I said, to get the thinner areas, I put very little pressure on my brush, and to get the thicker areas, I pressed down. So all of my bristles sort of smush onto the canvas and fan out, and so you get a much wider line. So I'm just gonna go over and make sure that they're all nice and dark. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna place my other flower while I've got this color loaded onto my brush. My other flower just sort of to the bottom right of that one. I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm touching my brush to the canvas, lightly pushing down and pulling up as I get to the center of my flower to meet the other petals. So let us know, guys, too, if you guys are flower experts out there. Dylan and I were debating what kind of flowers these were. When I'm painting, I have a tendency to just make up my own flowers as opposed to painting real ones from life, but Dylan is a bit of a plant enthusiast. He gets that from his mom, so let us know what you think the flowers are, and then we can let you know what Dylan said they were.
What we think, yeah. We've got a lot of our Let's Paint people in here, so we're relying on you. You guys have painted a lot of one-stroke flowers.
Yes, you have, yes. Okay, great. All right, so now that we've got those two laid down, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna paint our two other large flowers, and then we can start filling in all the smaller pieces around it to fill up that composition. So to get this pink, this lighter pink color, I want it to look just like this color, but lighter. So to do that, of course, we're gonna add white. So I'm gonna grab some of this. I wanna hang on to this color in case I need it again. So I don't wanna mix all of it, but I'm gonna grab some of it and get some white and mix that on my palette. And if you do use it all, that's okay. We can always mix some more, no big deal. There's lots of shades of these pinks, so if it's a little different, it will not matter. Okay, I'm gonna go slightly lighter, I think, still, by adding a little more white. Maybe even a little bit more. Okay, I'm happy with that. I like that pinky peach. So just like we did before, I'm going to wipe the excess paint off and rinse my brush before I paint those flowers. Get all that water out. And now, just like we did before, we're going to paint these two flowers sort of on opposites of these with this lighter pink color. You can see here too, I got a little fancy with it. I did some variations where I did it sort of to the side, where the petals are sort of cascading down as opposed to like a front view flower. So you can absolutely do it just like we did before. You don't have to get fancy if you don't feel comfortable. But if you're used to painting flowers, which I'm sure a lot of you are if you're from our Let's Paint group, then feel free to change up the shape and change up the angle of your flowers. And for those of you who don't know what our Let's Paint group is, we have a really great group over on Facebook, or if you're already on Facebook, right where you are, called Let's Paint with Plaid. And in that group, we do lots of tutorials. Andy Jones and Chris Williams go live twice a week. But there is a huge community of painters there who all love our folk art paints. So beginner painters and really advanced painters are all posting their work. They're complimenting and giving critiques and helping each other learn. But it's a really awesome Facebook group, and we've grown so much over the years. There's so many members now. So if you guys aren't a part of that, make sure to join, because there's really some great content in there as well that you can't get on our regular Plaid Crafts Facebook page. So make sure to check that out. If you're wanting more of what you're watching tonight, that is the place to go. Okay, so now that I've got all of my larger flowers sort of placed in here, I'm going to rinse my brush off again, and we're going to go back and we're going to fill in some of these buds. So that's just going to help us sort of shape our bouquet and add some variety and some detail instead of just having these 4 flowers. So I'm going to do it with the original color we mixed, this salmon-y coral color, the first one. I've got the same brush, and I'm going to do it in like little groupings. Because if you think of a flower bouquet, usually there's little groupings of buds. So that's the way I'm going to paint these. So I'm just going to press my brush down on the flat side as opposed to the vertical side. We're going to go horizontal with our bristles, and I'm going to kind of pull down to create these bud shapes. Do some here, maybe some up here. And you don't have to fill in all of the blank spaces because we are going to add some greenery and add some leaves to our bouquet, but this is just going to be some more colorful areas that we can add some details to in just a couple minutes. How's everybody doing out there, Dill?
They're doing good. I think we had some feedback from Darlene, the first-time viewer, that this is exactly what they've been looking for.
Oh, good. Well, I'm so glad to hear that.
And your husband.
Oh.
Who is this pretty lady?
Oh, hey, Justin.
Get back to feeding Jax.
Yeah. You got a baby to put to bed. Okay. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I think that's a good amount of buds. Like I said, we're going to add in some leaves too, so we don't want it to get too full because you want to have a place to put those. So I'm going to rinse my brush again. We're going to kind of keep blocking in all of the bigger areas of color before we add detail and a little bit of shading to our shapes. Okay, so for our leaves, of course, we're going to need green. So I'm going to grab some of my classic green. And then to give some variation in the green, to darken it, I'm going to use some navy. So you may already have that on your palette, but if you don't, go ahead and put some more. And then to lighten it, I'm going to use my daffodil yellow. So I've got plenty of that on my palette, but if you need to add some more, go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I'm still using the same brush. This is my 1/2 inch flat. I cleaned it off. I'm going to pick up some classic green, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of, it's very bright, and it doesn't feel like a very realistic green to me. So I'm going to put just a touch of navy in it, just to kind of tone it down, make it a little less bright, and it feels more like a realistic leafy green to me now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start putting some leaves in, starting with my larger leaves and then filling in some of the smaller ones. So I'm going to put a big leaf coming up here, and they're going to be a really similar shape to our petals, just larger and not quite as long. So you can even do it the same way. So I'm going to start at the bottom, I'm going to press down and pull up to get that leaf, and then I can just sort of build that out and make it a little bit larger, just following that shape that my brush made for me. And I'm going to do that again over here maybe. Add a leaf, you can go off your canvas. Do one coming up here out of our top flower. A little bit more. I'll do another one over here. Like I said, I'm trying my best to stick to my original composition as much as I can. Okay. Do some down here. I think that's it for our bigger leaves. And now I'm going to put some kind of in between these flowers. You can see here where there's some areas of green, like maybe there's a leaf behind the flower. So I'm going to do some of that kind of thing just so we can start filling in this navy space so we don't have quite so much of it. And so what I'm doing now is I'm going in one of these areas that's navy, and I'm going right up to the edge of my flower petals, but I'm not going right to it, because don't forget, we want to leave that navy border, and it's going to look really nice when we're done. I'll do some over here, just kind of creating these areas of green that sort of allude to the fact that there might be a leaf behind that flower. Gives us a little bit of a layered look. And now with this same color, I'm going to add some greenery just while it's on my brush to the base of our buds. So think about it when you see a little flower bud, of course the little new petals are growing out of that green base. So that's what we're going to paint now. So I'm going to go onto the bud, got my brush, and I'm going to smoosh down on the left and smoosh down on the right, and you get that pretty little shape. Left, right, left, right. You can make it really loose too. It doesn't have to be perfect. Kind of just a suggestion of it. Okay. We're going to stay on our greenery right now. We are going to, since it's on our brush, just to save us some time, we're going to add some different values to our greenery. So like I mentioned, we added a little bit of navy in the beginning to sort of tone our green down, and now we're going to add some yellow to give us some of these brighter areas of green. So I'm just going to pick up the yellow on my brush. I'm going to kind of work it into my brush on my palette. What I mean by that is just sort of get that yellow into the bristles. So I never cleaned off that green. I just added yellow. And now I'm going to add this to some of the leaves. So up here I'm going to start at the bottom and I'm going to follow the shape of the leaf and pull up. And since the green is still wet, it's going to blend into that and give us a really pretty sort of gradient effect that looks like a shadow and a highlight. Do the same thing here from the base. Follow the shape of the leaf. If you need to put a touch of water on your brush, you can do that. You don't want to dunk it in the water because you don't want to get tons, but just to sort of rehydrate that paint that's already on your brush. I'm going to do it down here as well. Add some yellow. Oops. Add some yellow in here. You can add some to the base of your little buds too. Just again to give it some variation. We don't want all that green to look so flat. We want it to look like a real leaf would have lots of different shades of green in it. Sort of touching my brush to it to give it some variation, like I said. Okay. Alright, so I like the way that's looking. Okay, so now I'm going to clean the green off my brush for now. We're going to add a little bit of variety, just how we did with the green just now, to our pink flowers. I'm going to go back and revisit those for a minute. Should get all that green off. I don't want my greens mixing with my pinks. Okay, so I still have some wet paint on my palette, which is great. If you don't, we can remix some of these colors. It's not a problem. But it shouldn't have dried all the way just yet. So we're going to create some variations, like I said, of these colors. So you want to have your dark pink here that we started with. You want to make sure you have some of this lighter pink that we had. And we're even going to make an even lighter version of this pink here to give it some highlight. So actually I'm going to mix a little bit more of this dark pink here. So that was some cardinal red and daffodil yellow. We'll start with that. And we'll add a little bit of wicker white. And that's going to give us that color. Okay, so I have some wet paint there now. I'm just going to wipe my brush off. I'm going to pick up some white and I'm going to mix it down here just with the paint that was in my brush to get a really light version of these two colors. Super duper pale. Okay, maybe a little bit more white because it's a little bit too close to that one. We want it to be a little bit different. There we go, that's pretty. All right, so now I'm going to get all this excess paint off my brush because I have tons of paint in my brush, and like I mentioned, we don't want to put that on our canvas because that's just way too much paint. We want to be in control of how much paint's going on our canvas and where it's going. Okay, so I'm going to start with this lightest one. I'm going to pick up some of this paint, and I'm just going to get a little bit on the very tip of my brush, right on that chiseled edge, and I'm going to follow some of the edges of these lighter petals. So I'm going to go up and down to get nice thin lines. I'm going to follow those edges. And we can thicken our petals a little bit with this, but it also gives us an outline that creates a little bit of value in our flower. Following those edges. Loading my brush in between petals if I need to. Using the chiseled edge to create fairly thin lines, sort of outlining these petals that we made earlier. Okay, so you can see there we've got some variation going on already. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to clean my brush off just yet because we're going to stay in this color family. I'm going to pick up some of this lighter pink color from earlier and do the same thing to my dark pink flowers here. Has anybody chimed in, Dylan, with what kind of flowers they think these are?
No, we haven't had any good suggestions. Come on, guys, you got to dig deep. Tell us what Jesse's painting here.
I really do, like I said, I have a terrible habit of just painting flowers from my brain instead of flowers from life, and so I never know how to refer to them.
They're very like poinsettia adjacent.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I could see that. I could totally see that. Are there any more spring flowers that look like poinsettias? I'll have to ask your mom. I'll have to ask Jean later. She'll know.
They almost look like fruit blossoms.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it'd be a big fruit, but.
You're saying that as if I know about fruit blossoms.
Oh, well.
Gardening guy. Okay, so you can see we're getting the same effect with our darker.
Oh, they're daylilies.
Daylilies.
That's
okay.
You're right. They are.
Who said that?
Kim.
Who's right?
Kim's right.
Well, thanks, Kim. Perfect.
Yeah,
I knew
they are.
existed.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, thank you. Now
What came first, the painting or the flower?
Yeah. I invented them. Okay. So while we have this color, this lighter color that we just used for our bigger, darker pink flowers, I'm going to add a little touch of these to the buds because that's kind of the same color that we used before. So I'm going to just sort of touch the top of them to give them like almost a little bit of a highlight. Okay. Alrighty, so again, I have not cleaned my brush off in a while. I still have the same color family. I'm gonna grab some of this like medium pink color. You can kind of see I've got a gradient going on my palette here from light to dark just because all my piles have blended, but that's okay. Now I have these nice in-between colors too. And I'm gonna use this to create some darker areas in the center of my lighter flowers. You can see I'm just sort of got some of my brush. I'm just dragging it in the center. I'm doing it really loosely, not very carefully, just so I just want to like place that color down. And I like the way that looks. I think I'm happy with this now. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna clean my brush off. We're gonna keep on moving.
We had another suggestion, a stargazer lily, which seems like it's in the daylily family.
Totally.
Yeah, it's just some more.
I could see that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna leave this for a moment. We're gonna kind of go down to the vase area. So we're gonna paint this glass. And glass can be super intimidating to paint because it has a lot of different colors and reflections and light areas in it. But we're gonna keep it really simple for this. We just want it to be sort of the illusion that there's glass there. We're not gonna paint every little highlight and shadow because that would just be a much longer and more advanced class. So we're just going to paint this very simple shape down here and then give a little bit of a frosted effect to kind of give us the illusion, like I said, that the stems are behind glass. So to do that, we're going to mix this really pale blue, almost white color. So I'm going to grab my wicker white because I need some fresh wicker white. Mine's got lots of red and pink in it. So I'm going to put a fresh pile over here. And I'm going to actually just use a touch of navy blue since I've already got some. So I'm going to go with a smaller flat brush. So this one is my number 10 flat. So I'm going to grab a good bit of wicker white and then just the teeniest touch of navy blue. A little bit goes a long way, so we don't want to start with much because then we can always add more, but we can't take it away. And that's already getting pretty blue, as you can see. This might be perfect. May even be a little bit too blue. We might want to add a little touch more white. Okay, I think that's perfect actually. So just like always, I'm going to wipe off that excess paint and rinse my brush. Okay, so I've got a nice clean brush now. I got all the excess water out. So I have that nice, I'm using my fingers, that nice sharp chisel on the tip of my flat brush. The bristles are making a nice sharp line. So this is just as good. A lot of people think when you're painting thin lines you need a liner brush, but oftentimes this sharp chisel on the end of your flat brush is just as good, sometimes better than a liner brush. It's easier to control if you're making fine lines. So this is the one we're going to use. So I'm going to pick up some of this really light blue we just made, and I'm not going to pick up very much because I kind of want to like sketch out the shape just because we're going to be freehanding it. So I say that a lot. I'm going to sketch with my paintbrush, and whenever I do that, I either water the paint down to an inky consistency to kind of do an underpainting or do a sketch, or I just put a very little bit of paint on my brush. You can see it's hardly even coloring the bristles. That's how little paint I have on there. It's almost just stained with it. But this will give me the ability to kind of sketch out my shape, and if I don't like it, it's easy to cover up that way. So I'm going to start from the bottom. I went a little bit further down with my leaves here than I did in my original ones. So I'm going to start about here, and my leaves are going to go a little bit further down. I want to give room for this foot of my vase here. So I'm going to do a line about 2 to 3 inches from the bottom. I'm just going to mark that there. Oh, my paint dried. I'm just going to mark that there very lightly so I can know where that's going to be the sort of this base of my vase. And then I'm going to widen that out, trying to make it as symmetrical as possible. And I'm going to have it going up diagonally to get this nice shape. And again, I'm trying to make it as symmetrical as I can. Because unlike flowers, this is not an organic shape. So this really would be pretty perfect and symmetrical in real life. So we want it to get as close as possible. Okay. So that is a good rough draft of my vase. You can continue up with some of the lines through your flowers that you would see if you want to. It's kind of up to you. And now we're going to go down and we're going to do our foot, the foot of our vase. So from this line that we just kind of sketched out, I'm going to go probably 1/2 inch below that. And that's where the top of that oval is going to be. So the oval is going to be just narrower than the base. So again, I'm just using that very sharp chiseled edge of my brush, and I have very little paint on my brush. I'm going to paint that little oval shape. You can see I'm kind of doing one side and the other side to make sure that they're nice and even. It's almost like chalk, like, you know, drawing with chalk to kind of map out where you want your shapes to be. And sometimes it's really helpful if you paint with your painting flat to hold it up in front of you, because oftentimes a lot of inconsistencies or maybe things that you don't like on your painting will jump out to you when you do that. It'll help you see proportions and placement and things like that a little bit better, as opposed to when it's laying flat and you can't see it as well. So this is the time where I would normally hold it up and look, and you can see, you know, if it's off center or lopsided or something like that. So you want it to come down to a narrow point on either side. Be very oblong. Okay, so I'm happy with that sketch, and I'm going to do the little stem of my vase, sort of going down into the middle. Okay, so now that I have it sketched out, I'm going to pick up, you know, a full load of this light blue paint, and I'm going to follow the line I sketched out with my brush. I'm still going to go on the chiseled edge, but I'm going to put a little more pressure than I was doing before, so I get that you know, little 1/4 of an inch-ish wide line. Putting about a medium pressure on my brush. I'm not pressing down too hard, but I'm also putting a little bit of pressure. And I'm following this line that we just made. All right. So that looks good to me. Okay, so we're gonna leave that. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna paint our stems, and that way we can start filling in our background. So I'm gonna rinse my brush off. And I've got some of this green on my palette still, so I'm gonna mix some green. I'm gonna pick up some of my classic green with a touchy yellow to lighten it up a little. And I'm going to use this to paint my stems coming down into my vase. So try to think about how stems would look. They wouldn't all be perfect. They wouldn't all be up, going straight and down. They'd be jutting from every which way from all of the different flowers and buds that you have in here. They'd be crisscrossing in some areas and touching the bottom. So just something to think about when you go to sort of paint your stems in every which way. So I'm going to start with one here. And I'm going to go up, and they will be really straight, so they won't bend, so that is something to keep in mind too, to make them look more realistic. Just some things to keep in mind. Do one crossing up this way. And you want to make sure you don't go over your leaves or petals, because of course the stems would be behind in our layering of shapes. Okay, so that's probably good. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush off yet again. And while that's drying, we're going to add some more details to our flowers, just to give it that a minute to dry before we paint over that sort of frosty halo effect that kind of signifies that we've got glass there. So I'm going to add some yellows to these buds. Same brush, rinse it off. I'm going to pick up some yellow, maybe a little bit of that pink so it's not too yellow, and I'm going to paint some of this into these buds here, just like I said, to give it some variation. I'm just kind of dabbing my brush lightly. And while I'm working with this yellow, I'm going to add the stamen to my flower as well. So I have the same brush. So for this part, you can either use the corner of your chiseled edge to paint these dots, or you can use the butt of your brush, the handle. So I'll show you how I do the handle. So I'm going to pick up some yellow. Make sure your yellow is pretty fresh. If it's starting to get that, skin on it, if it's starting to dry, you might want to either peel that off or get a fresh pile. And we're going to make some dots in the center of our flowers. And this is a really good time too, if you've still got some of this navy showing, to do your best to cover that up so we don't see that anymore. Just going to do a few dots in the center of each. This is looking really bright. It's looking a little bit brighter than I want it to. So now I'm not going to rinse my brush off. I'm just going to use the same butt of my brush to pick up some of this pink color and kind of just go back over it. So you still have that yellow coming through, but we're just going to tone it down a little bit with this pink. So it's not quite so like, whoa, yellow. I'm just going to go right over the dots that I already made. You can see how that just really just turns it down a notch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush off, make sure I get it off the handle of my brush so I don't make a mess. So I want to make sure that this green is nice and dry, and it appears to be. So while my light blue puddle over here is still a little bit on the wet side, I'm going to pick up some of that, and then I'm going to kind of offload my brush. And what it means to offload your brush, if you're a stenciler, this is probably a really common term that you have heard. it means to remove some of the paint from your brush. I'm going to pick up some, and then I'm going to kind of wipe it off onto my palette so that there's very little paint in my brush. And the reason we're doing that is because we're going to do sort of a dry brush effect to cover up some of these stems real quick. I'm just going to kind of tone them down. And we can do this a little more when we paint the background too, but I'm just going to kind of tone them down to create that sort of glass effect like we talked about. And I'm going to do it down in the base too. Okay, so now guys, you can see we've really got all of our large shapes painted in, and it's time to paint the background. So this really might be my favorite part of doing a painting like this, and the reason is because, first of all, it's kind of just satisfying. It's like, you know, painting a paint by number or coloring in a coloring book, just kind of paint around all the areas. But also it really makes the painting come together. It really ties it together and makes it look finished. And it's also a really crazy transformation. As you can see, the difference between these two paintings, this one on navy, which is a pretty painting in itself, but once you add these colors into the background, it just really looks complete. So that's what we're gonna go ahead and start doing now. So I'm gonna grab a larger-ish, a 1/2-inch flat brush, not that big. This is one of the ones we used earlier. And we're going to be using a lot of colors. As you can see here, it's kind of a bluish white, but there's some pinks in there, there's some yellows in there, there's some greens in there. So we're going to be using a lot of colors for this background. That's going to look like it's reflecting off of our flowers. So I think I have all the colors I need on my palette. So I'm just going to go through the ones you should have. I have plenty of wicker white. That's going to be a big one. I've got my yellow. I've got some pink, but I'm also going to add a touch of aqua. So I'm going to add a little bit over here. You're not going to need much color, of course. It's going to be mostly white, but we are going to add in some colors here and there. So I'm going to start by picking up some wicker white on my paintbrush, and I'm going to start in the top left, and I'm going to kind of do a slip-slap technique. So if you're not sure what I mean by that, it's going to be kind of like a cross-hatching kind of with your paintbrush, if you know about that. Kind of a left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, kind of going all over, not painting, you know, in straight lines like your base coating, but kind of just putting little brush strokes all over until the background is filled in. So I'm going to start at the top left, and you'll see what I mean. Slip, slap, just kind of wiping my brush off on the canvas almost. I'm going to do that, being mindful of when I get close to my shapes, just like we did with the leaves in the center, I'm going to go straight up to them. You can even kind of outline with the chiseled edge of your brush, but I'm not going to meet them because I really want to keep that navy blue outline. That's important. So I'm going to keep that navy blue outline. I'm kind of outlining it with my brush, you can see, and then slip, slap, filling in those areas in between. And we're going to do little areas at a time, and we want to keep our paint wet. That's why we're going to do small areas at a time so that we can add in some of these fun colors. So I'm going to stop there. I've got my white up there, and now I'm going to pick up a teensy tiny bit of navy. And what I mean by teensy tiny bit, I mean not navy, sorry, aqua. Teensy tiny bit. You can see, you can hardly even see it. And I'm going to slap that into my white. Tiny bit. Slap that into the white to kind of give it that pretty hue. You can even dip your brush into a little bit of water if it's starting to get dry. Oops, painting my frame. So you get that kind of tinted white look. So I'm going to keep kind of going around, starting with my wicker white, making sure that I don't go over my shapes or I don't go right up to the edge. I'm just next to the edge. And you don't have to do it perfectly. It can be very loose and painterly looking, if you will. But like I said, we're going to do small areas so that our white stays wet and it gives us an opportunity to add in those colors as we go. So I'm going to keep adding a little tiny bit of aqua up here. You can add in a little bit of baby pink. That would be pretty. We're going to keep doing this until the entire background of our painting is filled. How's everybody doing up there? See, I add too much aqua there. Sorry, I just asked Dylan a question, then I interrupted him.
You're good.
I did too much aqua there, so I'm going to try to sort of blend that out because I don't want it to be that bright. I'm going to put some white over it and sort of blend it around. There we go. So I don't want it to be quite so colorful. Okay, like I was saying, Dylan, how's everybody doing? Anybody in the comments?
They're good. Yeah, we had several other people agree that these are lilies.
Okay.
So great. And
It's
you know,
unanimous.
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they do look like regular lilies too. Day lilies,
Yeah.
regular lilies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you so much, everybody. Trying to figure it out.
I appreciate that.
Mhm.
I just, for some reason in my mind, I always think of lilies as white,
Yeah.
but I guess I just don't know flowers that well. I need to read up, do my research. Somebody who paints them so much, you think I'd know a little more.
But I like the vase. You know, we don't teach clear glass. That's a
Thank you.
whole part of painting itself.
Yeah, glass definitely can be a challenge, especially if you're trying to be, hyper realistic about it. That can take a long, long time to get good at for sure. That's why I just try to keep it nice and simple. I'm getting to some of these smaller areas now. But again, making sure I go straight up to my lilies, but not touching.
You don't want to get rid of your underpainting.
Nope, you want to leave that navy. And I'm still adding in some of these colors. You can do a little touch of yellow too. In there. I'm using that chiseled edge of my brush to get into some of these little nooks and crannies. You can do some of this darker green too in the background. Blend that a little in.
So I know we had a lot of people across the country. We're in Atlanta, and the weather is very unpredictable. So as far as like growing season and flowers, we're getting in the beginning of it, but it's not too late to have a horrible blizzard.
Yep.
Definitely not the beginning of March.
Yeah, true.
I have some little figs at home. I saw the leaves sprouting out starting
Aw.
this week.
Fun.
And all the like cherry trees are blooming here, and
Lots of pollen.
lots of pollen. Pollen has started.
Yeah, we can have pollen and snow, same week
Mhm.
here in Georgia. Definitely not unheard of. So you can see here, I'm not going to go much further down because we're going to overlap that with some of this yellow at the end to kind of give us a horizon line. like I said, I'm not going to go down much further because we're going to cover this up in a minute, but I'll go down a little bit just to make sure I get all those edges. I still want that navy, so make sure you don't go over. Just blending in some more color while it's still, my white is still wet. Kind of gives like a watercolor look, which is really pretty. And I'm also going to get down here in between my stems too. We can go back with that frost effect. Just touching a little more aqua down in here in my background. And again, just doing this slip slap effect, you're just really working that color into the background. Oops, that was a lot. That was way too much. I'm going to wipe all that excess out of my brush and try to scoop some of that off. That was more than I meant to do. Kind of just work that around. Blend it in. Do my best to make it all nice and consistent. Touching my brush in just a touch of water just to really rehydrate that paint that's already on my brush. I'm not trying to thin down my paint at all by any means. Do some more white down here, and then we're going to dry it and do that yellow. Just getting that color on there, and then I'm going to dry it really quick, and then the last step will be adding this little table or horizon line that we've got here. So we're going to mix this pretty gold color. And to do that, we are going to need our yellow, of course. I'm going to pick up some of my daffodil yellow. I'm doing it up here so you can see better. And then I'm going to put just the tiniest touch of this apple red. So with red, when you're mixing, a little bit goes a long way. It's a very powerful pigment. So you just want a tiny bit, and we can kind of work that in there and see what we get. It's going to be pretty bright because these are two bright colors. And as you can see here, this is a little bit more muted, so we may need to tone it down. Let's see how it goes. Okay, that's a pretty nice gold color. Okay, so to tone it down, if ever you have a super bright color and you need to tone it down, you want to pick the color that is opposite from it on the color wheel. So for example, on the color wheel across from yellow would be purple. So to do that, we need to add a little bit of, we already have some red in there, so we need to add a little bit of blue, because of course purple and red, or I'm sorry, blue and red make purple. So I'm going to add a touch of blue just to tone that down ever so slightly. Oop, it's going green, guys. But I don't hate it, actually. That's kind of a nice gold. The more I mix it, it's kind of like getting to be a little bit of an ochre color. So I'm going to touch more red. Yeah, and that's actually really nice. That's perfect. That's just what I'm looking for. So now we're going to do kind of similar to what we did for this glass effect. We're going to go kind of like a dry brush sort of effect. So I'm going to wipe off some of that excess paint. Pick up some more, and I'm going to do it right just above where the base of the vase is. Just like we did before, I'm going to kind of do that sort of sketching technique with the chiseled edge. So I know just where I want my line to be. I'm going to sort of go left and right to this dry brush effect. And for this one, I don't really want to do the slip slap. I want to kind of keep it left and right, because it almost gives the look of like wood grain, maybe like it's sitting on a wood table. But I like the kind of the difference between the slip slappy top and then the very horizontal bottom. I'm just going to do this dry brush effect. Left to right on the bottom, underneath that line we just made. Pick up a little bit of white if you want. Put that in. Just going to work it into the canvas. Picking up a little bit of white here and there. See, I'm just picking up a little bit of water just because my brush is really starting to dry out. I have a fan on in here, and I don't want it to be quite that dry for this dry brush effect. I want to make sure my paint goes a little further. All right, guys, so that was the last step for our lily painting tonight.
Aha.
Now
Our
that
very
I know.
intentional daylily painting.
Exactly, we should have named it that. So I hope you guys had so much fun painting with me. I know I had so much fun painting with you guys. I hope you learned something new. I hope you learned some new techniques. Don't forget that we are here doing Let's Paint Live the first Thursday of every month. And to paint along with us, you can use our Let's Paint Live 24-piece kit to paint all of the paintings we do monthly. So I'm really excited to show you the painting that we'll be doing next month. It's going to be taught by my friend Kirsten Jones, and it's going to be just in time for the holidays. And the holiday I mean by that is Easter. So I'm going to be painting this super duper cute fuzzy bunny. So I'll definitely be painting along because I absolutely love this painting. So make sure to tune in. I believe it's April 4th. It's the first Thursday of April, and it'll be right here on Facebook and YouTube at 7.